you don't really even get names for the
No,
most part of other
no.
people. So how do you think he did that?
You know what? I don't know. It's weird because I think about the kind of the supporting characters, the characters that aren't in the Brangwen family. I know I'm mispronouncing that last name as kind of equivalent in this book to the backdrop of the world changing, where you see it happening. You see all because this book follows generations, like 3 generations roughly, and you see the rapid changing of England, of the industrialization. And I feel like that is part of the tapestry akin to those minor characters where they're there, it's part of the fabric, but he really wants the reader to look at this family and these characters.
Hi, and welcome back to the Big Book Project. I'm so delighted to have with me today writer Mark Haber, and we're going to be talking about a book that Mark brought to my attention, The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
I'm great. It's so,
Good.
so good to see you. And
It's great to see you as always.
I'm really excited to talk about this book. When I asked you, would you like to come on the show and talk about a big book with me? You thought about it a little bit, and then you said, "I think I want to do this one," and I was totally game.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that D.H. Lawrence wrote a novel called The Rainbow. Like, I know
yeah.
Lady Chatterley's Lover and some of his other books, but I feel like this one is a little lesser known.
It's weird. It is a little lesser known. I know there's Lady Chatterley's Lover, which, of course, this is probably his best known book. And I think also because, like The Rainbow, it was banned, which also brings a lot of attention to a book. And then I think his earlier novel, Sons and Lovers, is pretty well known. And then actually, The Rainbow has a sequel, which is what is it? Not Women in Love, but
I think
there's
it is. I think it is Women in Love. I
Women in
think
Love, yeah, and
so.
it's a sequel. So it kind of follows Ursula, who is we'll get into, but the kind of the main character in the second half of The Rainbow. But no, it's a really great book. And when you asked me, it's one of those fun decisions. It's almost like a bookseller. It's like, what should we do for a book group or something? You want to do something that's I think you expected, because you and I are very similar, that I would pick something in translation, maybe something Russian or Latin American. And this book had surprised me when I read it, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, that I said, I'm going to do a curveball. And I was really happy you hadn't read it, because that being brings a pair of fresh eyes to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of dig in, maybe I'll just formulate my first kind of query about this book and something that I've been thinking about, and I'm really interested in your perspective. I'm just a reader, but you're a reader and writer. Um, so this novel is about the Brangwen family. It's
Yes.
very much about them. They're living in the mid to late 19th century in middle rural England. And the thing that was most surprising to me is how close this novel is with, and doesn't bring in hardly any characters outside of this family.
Yes.
It's it's so it's just about the relationships of various family members. I mean, we know that Tom Brangwen, the elder, he goes into town and has drinks with his buddies at the pub, but we really never hear the voices of those people, and they're really never. I, I I wouldn't say significant characters. They're You don't really even get names for the
No,
most part of other
no.
people. So how do you think he did that?
You know what? I don't know. It's weird because I think about the kind of the supporting characters, the characters that aren't in the Brangwen family. I know I'm mispronouncing that last name, as kind of equivalent in this book to the backdrop of the world changing, where you see it happening. You see all, because this book follows generations, like 3 generations roughly, and you see the rapid changing of England, of the industrialization. And I feel like that is part of the tapestry, akin to those minor characters where they're there, it's part of the fabric, but he really wants the reader to look at this family and these characters and their relationship and their love and hate and all these passions they have. So, how he did it, I'm not really sure. I've never, I mean, putting on my writer's cap, I always usually focus on a very brief period of time. Sometimes I'll go backwards and forwards to other periods of time, but usually the reader is in this moment. So to write a book that's not 1,500 pages, it's a sizable book, but not overwhelming, that covers 3 generations, is really unique and really interesting how he pulls it off. It's one of the reasons I admire the book is because of that backdrop of watching the world change, and it feels very organic.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not a huge book, but
No, I mean
I'm
it's
gonna
big,
say,
but
yeah, I'm gonna say it's a big book for our purposes. I mean,
it
I've
is.
got the Penguin Classics,
Same,
and
yeah,
it's well over, it's about 450 pages, a little
yeah,
more.
uh huh,
Um, in small print.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, we talk about all the time here that what you could call a big book isn't just the number of pages, but
absolutely,
it did really strike me that he was able to sustain this narrative with such a tight circle of characters without having to have like situations or incidents involving outside characters.
yeah,
And uh, just to give our listeners some context, we said it's 3 generations, and you know some um, some listeners might be thinking, well, if people got married, that doesn't even make sense. But I remember when Anna, the daughter of Tom Brangwen and Lydia, his wife, um, well, actually, I actually misstated that already. Anna, one of the characters, um, she starts having like a flirtation with Will Brangwen, which is Tom Brangwen's nephew. And I thought, oh my God, this isn't going to work because they're cousins. But then, no, it isn't the case because Tom is not Anna's father.
right,
Anna's mother was married a second time to Tom, but so even in that respect, when he's bringing partners in, and the generation underneath that, Ursula, Anna's daughter, um, she kind of falls in love with a family friend. Um, so it does still feel like you're just dealing with the same, like maybe 15 close characters without having any external influences
yeah.
other than, like you said, the changes that are happening in the world.
Right, right. But as you said, I think it's like those other minor characters. It's all kind of a backdrop where you're really focused on their land and their relations and those family members. So it's really focused on that. But yeah, and I also, one of the reasons I also like this book is because I haven't read a lot of Thomas Hardy. For I forget, he may be the exception, but I like the fact that D.H. Lawrence is writing about people that are very, I guess you would say, common. They're either. I mean, he came from a family of like coal miners, and his father was a coal miner. And I've read brief biographies of him where he would always be kind of an outsider when he would meet other bookish people and other, because of his accent and because he looked like he was from the other side of the track, so to speak. So I love that this book kind of doesn't focus on like a Henry James novel on the upper echelons of society, which I love as well. But I like that he really focuses on people that are more common. Maybe they're landowners, but they have to work for a living, and all those issues that come up with those types of lives.
Yeah. I think probably one of the things that people that are familiar with this book um, talk about the most is the sexuality in it,
Oh yes, yep,
and some of the sexual politics. So Before we get kind of into whether this is a misogynistic book
Right.
or not, I guess talking about this intense. It's so interesting to me that back in the time when this was written, there was another way to talk about sexual relations.
Yes.
And I think that this we all know that Lawrence is was known as being very kind of taboo in how
Yes.
openly he wrote about sex, but this seems very pale in comparison to the books we pick up today,
Sure.
um, as new releases. But it's a very, very sexual book.
It's a very sexual book. It really is. And I know there's those kind of camps of like, is it a little misogynistic? Is it? But I feel like, especially Ursula, I feel like she has agency. I feel like she's, he explores different types of relationships in a sexual manner. But so there's all these different kind of schools of thought of if it's done in good taste, if it's central to the story. But reading about the book, knowing we were going to talk about it, there were all these kind of articles and essays about um the importance of sex in the book, because it's very primal. It's a very primal book. There's a lot about nature and land and the primal forces of love and sex, and how that kind of connects some of the characters. If things are going well with like Tom and Lydia, um, you see them patch things up through sex, through making love and things like that. So it's, I think, a really important aspect of the book, and I don't think he's doing it to shock the reader as much as I feel very much that D.S. Lawrence had a sincere interest in the importance of sex in our relationships with others, and using it in literature. So I feel like he wasn't trying to intentionally get the book banned or make it seem like people clutching their pearls. This is definitely an interest of his, a really passionate interest.
Yeah, and he gets at sexual issues from such a deeply psychological and
Yes.
emotional level.
Yes.
It's not just y- um, it is very corporal the way that
Yes.
he portrays it,
Yeah.
but it's not a lot of. I mean, there's some like you know panting and caressing, but
Right.
it's a lot of it is in the characters' heads.
Yes. Yes, you're right. It is. You're right. That's a great point. It is very psychological, and it is in the characters' heads and their thoughts about what they're feeling or what they're going through. Yeah,
And
that's a really good point.
I don't I'm not really buying that this book is following sexual stereotypes or is misogynistic. I mean,
Yeah.
I think one of the most startling points in the book for me is Tom and Lydia's daughter Anna when she's married to
Yes.
Will, and they have a very uh, I'd say there's a lot of friction or friction in their relationship.
Yes.
They've got very strong uh, sexual passion for each other, but they're not really, in a way, they're not really comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in the book. Um, Sorry if I'm giving spoilers, but there's a scene in the book where uh Anna just like keeps having babies. She's kind of a listless character,
Yeah.
and all she's really interested in is having babies and nursing babies. And um Will's got a kind of an artistic impulse, and he's a little more ambitious, a little more of a go-getter, and he gets frustrated and fed up and uh, has a I won't say it's an affair because it doesn't get very far due to the young woman's protests. But he makes out with a woman one night,
Sure.
um, and comes back from town, and Anna realizes she's been waiting up for him, and she realizes like immediately that there's something different about him.
Yeah.
And that just turns her on more and more, because she's like, I can tell he's been with someone, and now he's a different person. He's a new guy. He's not the
Right.
same old staid Will. And they kind of like attack each other in a sexual, consensual sexual way.
Right.
And I think that that's a very, it had to have seemed so transgressive back then when Lawrence was
Yes.
writing. But
Right.
even today, it feels a little transgressive to me.
It does. It does. There's these things that I think are always kind of uh eternally transgressive, where you read it, you're like, wow, that's so true, but it's like, but it's also something no one talks about, or we kind of know that that happens, but it's not something that's written about or spoken about. So no, I'm sure at the time, absolutely, it was hugely transgressive. Um, the way that he approached these relationships and the sex, and then her kind of seeing something different in him, and then kind of hitting it off. So yeah,
Yeah. Also, I mean, I guess one could say that, again, I'm going back to the misogynistic and the stereotypical, or the criticism that these characters are stereotypes based on their sex. Anna is like a baby making machine,
yes, yes,
but her daughter Ursula really rejects that, and
yes,
she they use the Lawrence uses the word nausea a lot, that Ursula
yeah,
feels like absolutely nauseated around all of these little kids all the time and all these babies, and the
yes,
fact that she's kind of like, at school, like the representative of the family, because all the kids are very close in age, and so she's just, all the kids call her our Ursula. And whenever something goes wrong with one of the kids in a public setting, like it always falls back on her, and
yeah.
as a result, like she doesn't want to have children at all.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. I love that he's able to show the differences between generations, but also siblings, that you can be a brother or sister or the child of someone, and you see what they do and you're like, that's what I don't want to do. You see the differences um between people in the same family, which is obviously true. People are very, very different. And I love the fact that you could look at Anna as being a baby making machine, and she's in her lane as being the woman. This is what she does. And then you look at someone like Ursula. I think part of it is because it's a different time, but also Ursula has such a strong um, personality. That she's like,
Yeah.
this is what I want for myself, and I don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a little bit of it is a little bit of a rebellion, but Ursula also does some things in the book that are not stereotypical.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. As far as some relationships and what she explores, and I know it's like we don't want to give too much away for people
Yeah.
who haven't read it, but um, yeah, it's really interesting the way that he and I'm trying not to repeat myself, but approaches these different generations in the characters in the family, and I don't want to say what they represent, but how different they are, and that I feel like he gives them um kind of a three-dimensional depth, where you feel like there are people that exist like Ursula or like Anna or like Lydia, who's immigrated from Poland. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think those people aren't just typecast. They're really fully fleshed, characters.
Maybe another question for you from a writer's perspective. I read the intro by James Wood to
Ah,
my edition of the book,
yeah,
and he talks about the uh, the simultaneous flux and consistency in the novel,
yeah,
insofar as, um, a lot of these characters like seem like they've got a degree of inertia to them, like,
yes,
the same day keeps happening kind of thing.
right,
There's not a lot of excitement, and that probably is highlighted by the fact that we talked about that, it's just this, it's just this tight circle of characters. There's never an event in here where like, oh, a stranger comes to town
Right.
and
Yes.
and turns
Yeah.
over anything.
Right. Or I'm going
Um,
on a business trip to Berlin
yes,
or Prague. Right. Right. Nothing like that.
right.
Right.
Um, so you have this kind of, oh, it's the same situation day after day, but yet there's this flux in what the characters are thinking and feeling all the time.
Yes.
And it reminded me very much of a book that I've had on this show, uh, The Remembered Soldier. I had the translator,
Oh
David
wow.
McKay,
Yeah.
talking about that book by Annette Danier. It's a Dutch book,
Uh
and
huh.
it's very much uh, like this in terms of this very psychological novel where the characters are um, are deeply invested in each other, and you get this very intimate look at their own intimacy. And it seems like every day is the same day, but it
Yes.
totally is not.
Yeah.
And how do you think that as a writer you make this kind of consistent situation interesting time and time again?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And first of all, I think Lawrence is able to do this because this was kind of the world he grew up in. So he knows that every day, every season, every year is very similar to the one before and the one that's going to follow. So I think the key to him being able to do that is what you said earlier, is that instead of looking outward, he goes inward. So that's why I think it's so psychological, because um, if the days don't change, it doesn't mean the people that are living these days don't change. So I think that's one of the reasons why the book is so psychological, because if not a lot of outward activity is happening in the story, it doesn't mean all these interchanges aren't happening. It also, I think, he's able to create characters that he probably knew growing up. I'm sure he did, who live the same day, never leave the town they grew up in, maybe go to the neighboring village for a fair or something and then come back. And that some of those people love it and think this is what it is. And then other people, maybe like Ursula, feel trapped and feel like I've got to get out. There's got to be something more. But to answer your question, how I think he did it was by making the book so psychological, by showing all these inner thoughts and emotions of the characters to show that no one new comes to town. It's just another day. However, the attitudes and the feelings and the relationships you have are always in flux, if that makes sense.
Would you consider this a dark book?
I think there's two sides of this book. I think that it's dark, but I also think it's also strangely optimistic. Where I think there is, I think, a hopelessness to it, where you see these people kind of the way they meet their fates and the way that they kind of come and go in life, as we all do. But I also think there's this kind of nod to possibility, to the things that can happen um, if you either look outside yourself or look in yourself. So I don't know if I would call it a dark book. I think it's a very um, I think it has all the colors of the rainbow. I think it's got, I think it's dark at times, but I also think you can look at it as a book that's very, I want to say realistic, where you see all these colors of life, where there's days where you're hopeless and there's days where you see the promise of another day of possibility. So, what about you? Do you think it's a dark book, or I
Well,
feel like
there's a certain heaviness and moodiness about the
Mhm,
book, I think, because
absolutely.
the characters are kind of heavy and moody.
Absolutely. I was going to say it's not a light book. It does feel very heavy. It does feel very moody. I know exactly what you're saying. So I think to tip the scales, I do think it's kind of a darker book with glimmers of light and hope. But no, I definitely think that it is I don't think it's a doom and gloom book, but I definitely think it's on the heavier side.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of um There's not a deep focus on, like, suffering, in, like,
No,
a
no.
physical sense or anything like that.
Right.
It's not a trauma narrative,
Yeah,
um,
no.
but, yeah, I guess it's just this tone that everyone is kind of in a bit of a funk about something.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. I think tone is the tone of the book, I think you nailed it, is what evokes this sense of there's no reason to be depressed, but there's also not lot of reasons to be happy. It's very much like we're just living our lives and this is how it is. And I think D.H. Lawrence accomplishes this through tone, through the way the story is told. Um, I also think there's some beautiful descriptions of nature. So I think there's these little glimmers of light that show in the writing itself that there is this sense of something larger than us, maybe, whether it's nature or God. One thing I was going to say, I wanted to make sure I talked about, and this goes to what we were saying about the tone and the mood of the book, is that I saw a couple criticisms of like it's overwritten or this and this, and I love writers and books like Dostoevsky who are sometimes maybe over the top, or they go a little too far in whether it's a description or a feeling, and that's part of what makes that writer who they are, and it's not as much a weakness as the what makes them unique. So I love the parts where it seems like, oh, that maybe is a little bit garish or overwritten, but at the same time I embrace that. I love that about DH Lawrence, where someone may read this and go, oh, this description, come on. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I like about it, that it's got these things that make it unique. And I think you see that a lot with with Dostoevsky and other writers, where you forgive them because it gives them their unique genius, and it gives them you kind of give them leeway, because if everything was perfect, whatever, as in a writing sense, then you wouldn't have these you wouldn't have that joy of like you're actually reading a person. You're reading someone that's colors outside the lines, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so susceptible to overwriting. Give me
Yes,
overwriting all the
absolutely.
time.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Where they're not in some MFA program in Iowa saying, well, maybe trim this and trim this. It's like I said, it's a little bit of coloring outside the lines, and that's what makes it what it is. It makes it so
y
special to me.
yeah, although, there is overwriting here, but I feel like
Yeah.
it's done with, some modesty. I wouldn't call any of this prose purple.
No, no,
And
no.
I actually think purple prose is a compliment. I love purple prose.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I do too. I don't want to say overwritten, but yeah, purple prose, or in speaking about my own writing, I've always thought that like with like Reinhardt's Garden, there's things that I like when things go a little too far, and then when it's gone too far, I always, as the author, go, now I'm gonna go just a little bit further.
Yeah.
Whether it's repetitiveness or a running joke. I like when the joke has worn its welcome, and you kind of wink at the reader and go, and now I'm gonna even go further. And it's not for everybody, but I like that because it brings like I said, it makes the book unique. It's not trying to be I use this word perfect, and I mean writing and literature is very subjective, so what is perfect? But and I know you read books, we both do, all of us do, where you're like, wow, there wasn't one misplaced word, and that's a great feeling. But I also like the fact that the author isn't aiming for perfect as much as aiming to get the feeling on the page, you know
Yeah.
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 Well,
Um,
and
uh, one thing that I wondered about, and I'm not quite sure what Lawrence was hoping to do with this topic, and that's the topic of religion in the book.
yeah,
So
yes,
I don't know whether you've got a notion. I really don't. We've got Will and his husband who um, seems uh, kind of almost well, he's drawn to the church, and
yes,
he I don't I don't know whether you would say he's a devout Christian, but he very much believes in God. He sees the nearby church kind of as a sanctuary,
Yes.
in terms of a place where uh, his mind maybe is not as dark as it usually is. And
Sure.
Anna can't relate to that. This kind
Yeah.
of unrational belief.
Right. Um,
Um, yeah. What?
yeah.
Any
So
thoughts about what's going on there?
you know what? It's funny because rereading it, there, I did think about God and religion in respect to what was Deej Lawrence saying or how did he feel, and I think it's like the characters themselves that are also kind of different, where you can have a brother and a sister that are vastly different, or a mother and a daughter who are very different. I think that he, and I could be wrong, is trying to reflect the time and the period and the people, that there are people who would go to church and they didn't do it because maybe they didn't believe in God or didn't, but because that's what you did. And maybe it wasn't a question a lot of people back then would even ask themselves. It's not, does God exist? Is the church the home of God, as much as like, oh, this is what you do. And there's also people that are more pious and more devout, I think, in this book. Um, as far as D.H. Lawrence, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I part of me feels like when I think about this book, I think about the English countryside and I think about nature a lot. And I can't. I mean, he does write about nature quite a bit in the book. So part of me thinks that D.H. Lawrence is kind of this school of like God is in everything. He's in the trees. He's in the seasons. He's in, and I think there's that overarching feeling in the book um, that there is a God, but if you're going to find them, it's in those things. If that makes sense. That's the feeling I get. Um, Speaking for D.H. Lawrence, but I could be very wrong. In reading books about him, I can't. He wasn't obviously he was busy getting books banned and things, so I don't think he would take offense by me saying that he maybe saw God in nature. I'm not sure, but that's my impression of the book. What do you think as far as your take on what he thought about religion or God in this book?
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed about
Yeah,
it.
it's kind of yeah. It's I don't think we can put your finger on it. Yeah.
I mean, I think he wanted to draw this contrast between the rational Anna.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, rational in terms of the way that she thinks about this. She's got strong passions when it comes uh, to sex and
Yes.
relationships. Her relationship with Will, but I guess uh, maybe maybe this is one aspect of a sensual nature that Lawrence wanted to include in the book. You know, we've got this
Yeah.
sexual sensuality, but then
Yes.
there is also this other like aspect of the sensual in terms of your emotional reaction to God and the church and all of the symbolism and the
Yeah.
ritual
Yes.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really to me it's such a book. I mean, to me it's a classic, but it's also such a book of the time. And what I mean by that is that not that he was writing the book that everyone was writing at all. What I mean is that he was able to reflect his youth and the way he grew up in the English countryside and the way that people thought and lived their lives. And and went to church and things like that. So to me, I love the fact that God or religion is in the book, but it's in a way that as a reader I appreciate, where it's not it's it's there for the reader to either take or not, and to read it into things or not, to read it into the description of a sunset or the cycle of families of the patriarch. I don't want to give anything away, but the way he loses his life kind of early in the book. Um, that it's not shoved down your throat, that you may see religion, churches are described, they're there, people go. That's I think where yeah, that is where Tom meets Lydia, I think the first time. So I'm kind of digressing, but I like the fact that God and religion is as much in the book as the reader wants it to be, and you can kind
Yeah.
of pick and choose, like I see it here or I don't want to look at it at all. And I appreciate that as a reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is in this book an immigrant story, right?
Yes.
We've
I'm
got
glad you brought that up.
Tom's wife Lydia, who arrives in London from Poland after
Mhm.
her first husband dies, and she's got a 1 year old daughter, Anna, with her, and she makes it to, I think, Yorkshire, and is working there before she gets a job working for, I think, the rector of the
Yes.
town where Tom lives, or outside of which Tom lives. And there is I do think that Lawrence is drawing on some of the cultural differences
Yes.
between this countrified English place, and having this Polish woman come into it.
I agree, and I think there's a little more depth that he gives to the story with her coming from Poland, but also her remembering her first husband,
Yes.
remembering being in Poland, and then those kind of cultural differences, and her probably early in the book not talking a lot to other people because her English is limited or she doesn't feel confident. So all these little nice details that show that there is a bit of an immigrant narrative, in the story as Lydia is concerned, and I think that gives it a lot of an extra kind of depth to the story. She's not just this English woman that was brought up in outside of London, or that her first husband was also English. This is a person from Poland who grew up in a different culture with a different language. um and then her, Anna, that's all she knows for the first year or two of her life is her Polish mom. So um yeah, so it's really interesting, but you're right, there is that narrative too, which I love. I think it really adds to the story because you don't expect it in a way. Like, oh, it's Stage Lawrence of Rainbow. It's a small novel, or it's a novel, not small, a novel in like a small town in the English countryside.
Yeah.
And then you get this major kind of character that is a Polish immigrant, which
Yeah.
yeah.
I particularly think that he did well. There's a maid or housekeeper, Tilly, that kind of
Yes.
uh, runs through many of
Love
the
Tilly.
generations. She must be very old by the time she dies.
Yes.
But when Tom starts noticing Lydia, she doesn't quite know how to handle that. It's not that she's necessarily antagonistic. It's just that, like, she can't comprehend Lydia at all at first.
Yes. She's very mysterious in a way. Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Because all of their cultural reference points are different. Um, yeah, that's really, I'm really glad you brought that up because that brings, I keep saying a depth to the story, but it's not just these English people. It's also people from other cultures, and so it's those little glimpses to the outside world that I like, where they may reference London, but they all also reference this larger world that's out there. And I love books that do that, where I'm not trying to plug myself. My book that's coming out, Ada, it's very very narrow. It's in a small town or small village or city somewhere in Europe. You don't know where. But once in a while, I like to go outside of the story and I mention the Americas because it's the 1600s, and I mention Mexico. And what I'm trying to do, and I think what D.H. Lawrence does great, is the story is here. It's in this one lane, but I am going to go out a little bit and brush stroke the larger world so that the reader is reminded that even though we're in this vacuum or this little microcosm, there is Mexico or there is Poland. That other world is still existing out there. And I love that, and I think that's something that adds to the tapestry of the rainbow is Lydia's Polishness. So yeah,
What else about the book do you want to talk about, or it struck you as
I
interesting?
I just think that it's and I was thinking about this word a lot. I think it's a very passionate book, and I don't just mean the sex and but I mean it's I love how so it's the passion of the characters, but it's also the passion of D.H. Lawrence writing about these characters. Whether it's the descriptions of the countryside and nature or time, the cycles of the seasons, or these people who want to break out of themselves and get out of the cage of their small town in England, or see something larger, or people who don't know enough that they're not happy, so they go to the tavern or the pub every night and they drink because they don't realize, and we do as a reader usually, wow, you're deeply unhappy and you've always lived in this town and you will always live in this town, you're going to live and die here. So I always think of this book as being a very passionate book. I think the writing is really passionate. And I think the characters, I mean, some of course just go through the motions. um it's just a great snapshot of humanity, of people living their lives and trying to be, I don't want to say true to themselves, but living the only way they know how to. And whether that's having lots of kids, or whether that's having an affair, um, or wanting to be a teacher, there's all these different things that to me speak to passion, human passion,
Yeah.
as well as the writing itself.
I thought one of the really lovely, lovely parts of the book, and I don't know whether there's a lot of authors in this period of time that have addressed this as much or in quite the same way, but
Uh-huh.
this really close relationship between little girls and their fathers.
Yes.
We
Yes.
see we see 2 generations of that. I mean,
Yeah.
Tom, even though Anna is not his child, and
Yeah.
he does have biological children with Lydia, 2
Yes.
sons, he still has this affinity for Anna.
I love the relationship.
And then also, Anna and Will's daughter, Ursula, again, as we said, Anna has a bajillion babies.
Right. Right.
But it's Ursula that Will always feels, at least until
Yes.
she, is a teenager, that he
Mhm.
feels very, very close to and bonded with. And I think it's just, I think those parts are beautiful, the way that he
I do
talks
too.
about that relationship.
That reminds me, there is something that I think is so beautiful, and it goes back to the father daughter relationships, which is a great point you make. I think he really does show that kind of the beauty of it, and that I don't think there's a lot at that time that was maybe written about those, that dichotomy. Is when Lydia is having she and Tom's first baby, and uh, Anna is really upset, and she goes to the barn. He takes her to the barn to kind of calm her down. And then she falls asleep, probably, I think, in the hay. And it's just something so beautiful about that. And meanwhile, in the house, of course, Lydia is in labor. And there's something so moving and beautiful about that, that it's one of those images that kind of stays with me.
Yeah, yeah, that scene is remarkable because
Yeah.
Anna's just, I think she's like 3 at the time or maybe 4,
Yes.
and she's just screaming her head off,
Yeah.
won't stop, saying, "I want
Mhm.
my mother, I want my
Love my
mother, I want
Yep.
my mother," and,
Yeah.
meanwhile, her mother is, like, groaning and screaming in the loft above because she's, heavily in labor,
Yeah.
and Tom just, like, takes her outside, it's raining
Yes.
heavily, and they're both getting soaking wet, and he takes her into the barn, and she's still screaming, and um it takes a long time for her to settle down.
Yeah.
Tilly's having a fit,
Yeah.
like, oh, what
Yeah.
are we gonna do, she needs to settle down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really
It
memorable and beautiful scene.
it really is, and and I love the fact, because back then you could do this. You could see the father just yell at the child or blow up or spank her and say, "Get out of my sight! I don't want to hear it." And there's a deep humanity that he has, this empathy for this child, and he loves her. And I think that's one of the reasons why, when I think of this book, besides like passion, I also think about nature. Is that there's so much nature in what you and I just spoke about. There's rain, there's labor, there's childbirth, there's cows in the barn, and this little girl crying. So back then, nature was hitting you in the face. You lived in it. You lived in the outside world, and you had a house. But besides that, you were one of the earth. You were connected to it, and so I love that. I see that kind of come through in this book. That you really see the countryside, and you see um, the cycles of the seasons, in this book, in this writing, and I love that. That's why I think nature, human nature, but also outside kind of nature, plays a huge role in the rainbow.
Yeah, there's, in terms of that fraternal relationship, it's kind of mirrored a little bit in the joy that Will gets when he's every day coming home from work, and Ursula, she's a toddler, and
Yes,
she's just running towards him like through the field. He can see her, and he's so afraid she's going to fall down. She's going to fall down, so he just runs towards her as fast as he can, and
yes,
so he can meet her and pick her up. And
yeah.
yeah, there's a really really special, poignant parts of the book.
There are. I absolutely agree, and I'm glad that you you like those and saw them and appreciated too. Yeah, there's this deep um, uh, love between father and child, mother and child, but definitely with the fathers and the daughters, it's really moving. It really is. And I can't think of other books where they in that time period that focus on it the way that Lawrence does in this book. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
maybe part of it is too that what you said, that there's a lot of books that are written around this time. What when was this book written?
I want to say 19. I think it was published in 1915, I believe.
Okay,
So it was probably written in the early 20th century.
S- so uh, the um, the kind of emphasis in that time of writing about the upper classes,
Yes,
and you just kind of get the feeling that in a lot of those books, oh well, until the child is like, at semi, grown up, 8,
right.
9, or 10 or something, that's not a father's, the child might be pretty to look at for a
Sure.
few minutes a day,
Right, right.
in a little pedophore, and please curtsy, and then like, yeah,
Yes.
nurse, take the child away.
Yes, be off. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that kind of children are to be seen, not heard, and take them away
Yeah,
their inner character. So to see this in like a major book by I think a major writer is great. And I think it also goes back to his upbringing and being I know there's probably different terms for it, but being like a blue collar writer. And I remember reading when I read this book, I became obsessed with this book, but also his life and other things. And just he would go to Oxford or go to different colleges and speak to other writers and professors. And he was always the odd one. He was always the one that had that accent and spoke that way. And the way that he wore his clothes and cut his hair. This is D.H. Lawrence. That he was always a bit of kind of the outcast for the kind of the hooty tooty literary types. And and I think that shows in this book the things that he pays attention to and writes about. They I don't think you see as much in whatever maybe. I said Thomas Hardy because I read him years ago, but not recently. But someone like Henry James, who's interested in Americans and British people, but always the elite and the wealthy, that kind of the 1%, if you will. And that's not D.H. Lawrence's uh, interests. So
yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
I'm so glad you read it and liked it. I mean, it was really one that I remember I texted you. I'm like, the rainbow. And I was really happy you hadn't read it and that you were like, yeah, let's do that because it is one of those books that I love to get people to read, to just go, if you haven't read The Rainbow, I really think you'll like it because yeah, to me it's such a great work and just these generations of family, how he's able to do everything we've spoken about is really, really impressive.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss to let you go without having you talk a little bit about the release of your book
Yeah.
forthcoming this year.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lori. Yeah, I have a book coming out, my fourth novel, which is crazy because I feel lucky I had a book out. So like that four, I'm like, wow, I feel very lucky. Not that I haven't worked really hard, but I'm always really gracious that I get to do this. Yeah, it's called Ada. No relation to the Nabokov novel that people have asked me about. It's just a woman's name, and yeah, it's a very small, almost a novella book, kind of a comedy but about passion and obsession and a bit of a satire or a lot of a satire on I would say leadership or power. The main character, the narrator, is kind of rules a country. I say kind of because he kind of does, but he kind of doesn't. And kind of the solitude of authority. That when you're the top dog in charge, it's pretty lonely. And and it's the one book out of the four that I've had published that I would say is definitely the most satirical. Where satire was always maybe a thread in my books or a little bit of an element. This one, if someone says, "Oh, it's a satire," I would kind of agree and say there's other things as well, but it's very much a satire on definitely men's obsession with power and what they'll do to kind of keep it and at the expense of everyone around them. So no, I'm proud of it, and I think it's funny, and it moves at a clip. I think you can read it in two sittings. So it comes out in July.
Okay. Yeah, and it is a beautiful cover. I should have brought it. I've
Oh,
got a
that's okay. I
galley of
love the
it.
cover. Thank you.
Yeah, it's it's
Oh,
it's bright pink. It's gonna stand out at my bookstore and all the
oh,
bookstores
oh,
so
thank you.
well.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that in July and putting it
You're so
in
kind.
in readers' hands. Are there other books that you've read in the last, I don't know, several months that you feel like really passionate about? I know that you've got a full-time job in addition to
I do.
writing
I do.
at
Yes.
Coffee House Press, but,
Yes.
is there
Um,
anything that comes to mind?
There is one that once we're done recording, sorry, listeners, I will tell you about. I'm glad you said this because I do want to tell you about, but it's one of those things that's still behind the scenes, so I can't talk about it, but you have kind of a connection. So I'm excited to tell you about that. So remind me. But honestly, I see a lot of people reading this, and besides reading for work, what I've spent the last month on so far, and maybe you've read it or not, I'm reading The Count of Monte Cristo, which I'd never read. And
I have read that.
it's so good. Oh my, it's just incredible. I love it. It's got everything. I'm almost done. It's like 1,200 pages. I'm on like page 850, so I'm getting there. But so I want to kind of champion contemporary writers and books, but I've really been lost in Alex Dumas' world. Did you enjoy it?
You know, I did enjoy it. I just remember what seemed to be, and this is my only criticism of the book,
Sure, sure.
the interminable, what seemed to be interminable time where he's like you digging with the spoon to try to get out of prison. That
Yes.
just seemed to go like
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah. And you're reading that and it's taking along and you're looking going, I still have like 1,000 pages to go.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, but no,
but
I'm very much enjoying that.
yeah, it's a fun book for
It
sure.
is. It's a lot of fun. I think just with the world we're living in, I think a lot of people have kind of gone back to I think reading classics. It's almost like a comfort read. I want to read Bleak House next and just these books that I haven't found the time in my life to read. You read so many books if you're a reader, and there's always a gap in your reading, which is the beauty of it because it's endless. No, there's a lot of books coming out that I'm very excited about, though. One of my favorites, Caesar Ira. I know that New Directions is coming out with a book of his. That's I think five like novellas in one volume, like
Yes.
five short novels. So I'm excited about that. How about you?
Well, for the Big Book Project, our group read right
Yes.
now is Dostoevsky's The Idiot.
Oh, yes. Yes, I've only
Um,
read it once, and I went back to read it a couple years ago, and I didn't because I got intimidated. Even though I'd read it with all the characters, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for it. You gotta have to tighten your belt and just jump in, and it's always worth it. But yeah,
yeah. Yeah, we're having a really interesting, discussion,
love it.
on the Substack. A lot
Yeah,
of great comments, because there's just it's a reread for me as well, but
sure.
it's it's just very deep and,
Yeah.
there's a lot of layers.
Oh yeah,
S
yeah. Oh yeah, I mean,
um,
you're my go-to Russian person. I mean, and love, and I love that about you is your love and passion and knowledge of Russian literature. Especially for me, I mean, I think the 20th or 19th century Russian literature is like just a high watermark in writing and universal literature. I think there was a period like, oh my gosh, these writers they all lived at the same time and they wrote these books. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of classics, and there's so much good stuff coming out. But I've got a list of things I want to get or I'm looking forward to, but I
yeah.
know we'll finish and it'll come to me when we're done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's always such a pleasure to see you, Mark.
thank you for inviting me. Thank you for doing this, and for reading the Rainbow along with me and enjoying it. I mean, I really I appreciate it, and everything you do. So
Well, I appreciate you, and I know that you're busy, and I'm sure that you're probably working on another book. So thank you for spending some time with us today.
my pleasure, Lori. Thank you so much, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.